In the deep desert of Arrakis, where golden sand stretches beyond every horizon, an ancient rhythm pulses beneath the surface. Here, in the vast quietude of dune and sky, the most precious substance in the known universe flows through cycles older than human memory. The spice melange, cinnamon-scented, blue within blue, emerges from relationships so intricate, so perfectly balanced, that they govern not merely a planet, but the movement of stars themselves. Tonight, we trace these quiet connections. We follow the hidden pathways that link the smallest desert creatures to the grandest ships that fold space between distant suns. For on Arrakis, nothing exists in isolation. Everything serves the greater pattern. The wind carries with it whispers of transformation, of water becoming scarce, of creatures becoming something more than themselves. In the cooling hours, when the great heat retreats, we listen to these ancient stories written in sand and survival. The year moves toward the great change, when House Atreides will take stewardship of Arrakis from their ancient enemies, the Harkonnens. Across 10,000 worlds, the Imperium watches this transfer with careful attention, for Arrakis remains the sole source of Melange, the spice that makes civilization possible. The political structure of human space rests upon what the wise call a three-point balance. Imperial household balanced against the federated great houses of the Landsraad, and between them, the Guild, with its absolute monopoly on interstellar transport. In politics, such tripods prove the most unstable of all structures, yet this one has endured for millennia through the binding power of a single substance. The Combine Honnet Ober Advancer Mercantiles, known simply as CHOAM, stands as the great commercial engine of human space. This imperial trading company reaches into every populated system, moving goods across the parsecs, ink vines and whale fur from distant oceans, sugar wire that carries messages between stars, Ixian artifacts of bewildering complexity, entertainers and artisans, the products of 1,000 worlds. Each cargo bay contains the wealth of nations. Each trade route binds systems in webs of mutual dependence. Yet all these vast enterprises pale before a single cargo, the spice of Arrakis. When CHOAM directors gather in their great halls to measure the Empire's pulse, they speak first of Melange. When the balance of power shifts among the great houses, it shifts with the tide of spice allocation. Between the imperial throne and the great houses moves a third power that answers to no earthly authority, the Spacing Guild, with its jealously guarded monopoly on faster-than-light travel. Guild highliners, vast ships that could carry entire armies between stars, cannot function without Melange. The navigators who guide these vessels through folded space require spice to achieve their prescient trances, to see safe pathways through the dangerous dimensions beyond normal space. Without Melange to ignite the linear prescience of guild navigators, people cross the parsecs of space only at a snail's crawl. Ships attempting such journeys without spice-enhanced guidance vanish into dimensions that have no names, lost forever in the mathematical impossibilities of uncharted space. Three great dependencies flow outward from this single desert world. First, the dependency of movement itself. Without spice, the Guild's great ships become mere metal, unable to cross the void between suns. Human civilization would fragment into isolated worlds, each system cut off from all others, returning to the Dark Ages when communication between stars required generations of patient travel. Second comes the dependency of time. Melange extends human life far beyond its natural span. Without the geriatric properties of Melange, people live and die according to the ancient measure, no more than 100 years or so. The wealthy of 10,000 worlds consume spice to maintain their youth, their vitality, their centuries of accumulated power. Without Melange, the rulers of the Imperium would age and die within mere decades, their carefully constructed dynasties crumbling into dust as surely as sandcastles before the tide. Third flows the dependency of governance. Even the vast middle classes across human space consume diluted spice with their daily meals, binding them to Arrakis through every breath, every heartbeat. This universal consumption creates the ultimate economic dependency. The planet's output determines not merely the wealth of empires, but the very rhythm of human existence across the galaxy. Each day, across 10,000 worlds, billions wake to meals touched with the faintest trace of cinnamon. Each day, they unknowingly renew their bond to a desert planet they will never see. Each day, the spice flows through their bodies, extending their lives by precious months and years, sharpening their perceptions, binding them into the great web of addiction that keeps the Imperium functioning. Yet beneath these galactic forces, a more ancient pattern operates. The true architects of spice production care nothing for human politics, nothing for the rise and fall of dynasties. They follow biological imperatives established millions of years before the first human looked up at the stars and dreamed of reaching them. To understand the spice, one must first understand water, or rather, its absence. The Fremen of Arrakis have learned this lesson with a thoroughness that would humble any off-world ecologist. They speak of water discipline, water burden, water debt. In their language, water and life have become synonymous, for on Arrakis, the two cannot be separated. The still suit represents their greatest achievement in this discipline, a garment that reclaims the body's moisture with such efficiency that a properly suited person loses no more than a thimbleful of water per day. The suit's tubes and catch pockets form a secondary circulatory system, cycling precious moisture from breath and perspiration back to the wearer's lips. Even the water of tears is recaptured, for on Arrakis, giving water to the dead is the ultimate offering of respect. A Fremen child learns the still suit before learning to walk upright. The chest adjustment for maximum pumping action from breathing becomes second nature. The neck and forehead tabs tighten to prevent friction blisters, feel as natural as skin itself. When young Paul Atreides first donned a still suit, his movements carried an instinctive knowledge that puzzled even the planetologist Kynes, as though some genetic memory guided his hands to the proper adjustments. Beyond the still suit lie 1,000 other adaptations. The paracompass that reads the planet's magnetic variations, sand snorks for breathing beneath dune slides, maker hooks for mounting the great worms, thumpers for calling and directing their movement. The Fremkit manual speaks of these tools in almost religious terms. The place full of life, where Al-Lat shall never burn you. Each device represents centuries of refinement, countless lives spent learning the desert's harsh lessons. The Fremen understand that Arrakis shapes everything that lives upon it. The deep desert teaches patience through extremes of temperature, sand surfaces that reach temperatures hot enough to cook flesh, yet cool by 25 degrees a foot above ground. It teaches precision through scarcity, every gram of moisture precious beyond any off-world currency. It teaches reverence through power, the great storms that can strip flesh from bone, the worms that can swallow entire spice factories. Most importantly, the desert teaches the relationship between water and spice. Where water gathers in large quantities, spice cannot form. Where spice emerges in abundance, water becomes the poison that triggers transformation. The Fremen know that their own bodies, with their cellular bondage of moisture, represent the perfect balance, enough water to sustain human life, yet not enough to disrupt the spice-producing cycle that makes their world valuable to the galaxy. Deep beneath the desert surface, in caverns and pockets carved by geological time, live the little makers, creatures the Fremen call sandtrout. These beings, no larger than a human hand, exist in a state between plant and animal, their leathery forms pulsing with slow purpose. They are the guardians of Arrakis's most essential secret. They regulate the planet's water. Each sandtrout can insist small amounts of moisture, sealing it away from the surface world in microscopic pools. Working in vast colonies that stretch for hundreds of kilometers beneath the sand, they have transformed what was once a water-rich planet into the greatest desert known to humankind. This was not destruction, but preparation, for the sandtrout carry within their genetic memory the knowledge of their own magnificent destiny. The sandtrout were not native to Arrakis. In the deep time before human memory, they arrived from some other world and found a planet rich with lakes and seas. They proliferated beyond the capability of existing ecosystems to deal with them, systematically encapsulating the available free water until the great transformation was complete. They made this choice not from malice, but from biological necessity. In a planet sufficiently dry, they could move to their sandworm phase. Fremen children play games with sandtrout, poling for them in the deep places where water accumulates, teasing them into thin glove membranes before taking them to the death still for their precious moisture. It becomes difficult to think of these mindless little creatures as shapers of enormous events, yet their collective will has remade entire worlds. The sandtrout actively resist great accumulations of water near the planet's surface. They sense through chemical awareness when moisture threatens their delicate balance. Predator fish swim in the qanats below Fremen CHs because the Fremen have always known to plant them there. The fish controls sandtrout populations that might otherwise compromise the water supply entirely. When the conditions align, when temperature and pressure and the subtle chemistry of the deep desert reach perfect balance, the sandtrout begin to lose their grip on hoarded water. The moisture seeps into growing masses of organic material, creating what the spice workers call a pre-spice blow. These masses generate their own heat, their own complex chemistry, brewing in the darkness beneath kilometers of sand. The process releases gases, sweet, cinnamon-scented, rich with the chemical precursors of melange. A planetologist dying in the deep desert can smell these pre-spice vapors and know that death approaches not just for himself, but for any creature caught above when the mass reaches critical temperature. The rank, semi-sweet ethers carry both promise and peril. These pre-spice masses exist in delicate equilibrium. The little makers lose water into the mass gradually, their deaths by the millions, providing the organic foundation for spice formation. A 5-degree change in temperature can kill vast sandtrout colonies. The surviving few enter a semi-dormant cyst hibernation, emerging years later as small sandworms, most of whom will be devoured by their larger brothers before reaching maturity. The chemistry involved defies laboratory reproduction. No scientific facility has ever succeeded in creating artificial melange, despite centuries of effort and unlimited funding. The process requires not merely the right temperature and pressure, but the living interaction of sandtrout colonies, the specific mineral content of Arrakis sand, and the planetary magnetic field's influence on organic chemistry. When a pre-spice mass reaches the critical threshold, the transformation becomes explosive. The little makers' chemical factories go wild, producing in minutes what took months to accumulate. The sand above bulges and shifts. Deep tremors run through the desert. And from this violence comes the most valuable substance in the known universe. When the pre-spice mass reaches critical stage, the desert trembles. What rises from the depths is not mere spice, but the birth cry of a new form of life. The chemical explosion that produces melange is also the signal for surviving sandtrout to begin their metamorphosis into something far grander. The great sandworms that the Fremen revere as Shai-Hulud, the makers of the desert. These titans, growing to lengths that dwarf the greatest ships of human construction, become the living guardians of the spice cycle. A mature sandworm can stretch 400 meters in length, its great body moving through sand as easily as a fish through water. The Fremen speak of them with reverence that borders on worship, for they understand that Shai-Hulud grants life to the desert and death to the unwary. The sandworms' movements through the sand distribute melange across vast territories. Their passage creates the spice blows that harvesting crews seek, rich concentrations of melange pushed to the surface by the worms' underground migrations. Without Shai-Hulud, the spice would remain locked in deep caverns, unreachable by any human technology. The great worms serve as living monitors of the desert's water balance. Their very presence prevents large accumulations of moisture that might disrupt the delicate ecosystem their sandtrout children maintain. Water is poison to them. Large bodies of water trigger the same explosive chemistry that creates melange, but in lethal concentrations. When Fremen need to produce the awareness spectrum narcotic they call water of life, they drown a stunted worm in a sealed cistern, forcing the chemical transformation that produces the concentrated drug. The worm's territorial behavior ensures the continuation of the spice cycle. Big ones may control 300 or 400 square kilometers, smaller ones proportionally less. Within their domains, they patrol with senses that detect the slightest vibration. The rhythmic footsteps of a human walking across sand will summon a worm from kilometers away. The mechanical operations of a spice harvester create a dinner bell that no sandworm can ignore. Yet the Fremen have learned to work with this territoriality. Through careful study of worm movements and feeding patterns, they can predict safe passages across the deep desert. They know the sandwalk, the broken rhythm that mimics natural phenomena, confusing the worm's hunting instincts. They understand that a properly placed thumper can call a specific worm, and that maker hooks driven into its rings can turn a deadly predator into controlled transportation. Above the desert, the industry of spice harvesting unfolds in carefully choreographed urgency. Factory crawlers, great tan and blue beetles with wide tracks extending on arms around their bulk, lumber across the sand like mobile refineries. The inverted funnel snouts poke into rich spice beds, drawing up the precious melange-laced sand through pipes and separators. The crawlers themselves dwarf human concerns. Often 120 meters long by 40 meters wide, they require crews of 26 workers to operate efficiently. Their Grid-X planes separate sand from spice mass in the second stage of refining, while internal ovens process the raw material into standardized loads. A full crawler can extract enough spice in a single operation to buy a planet. Yet for all their mechanical might, the crawlers remain vulnerable. They cannot move quickly enough to escape an approaching worm, cannot defend themselves against creatures that view them as territorial invaders. This vulnerability has shaped the entire spice industry around a simple principle. Get in fast, extract what you can, and escape before Shai-Hulud arrives. The carriole wings orbit overhead like metal angels, their sole purpose to snatch crawlers from danger when worm sign appears. These aircraft represent marvels of engineering, large enough to lift the massive crawlers, yet fast enough to outrun a sandworm's underground approach. The carriel pilots train for years to master the split-second timing required. Too early, and valuable spice is lost. Too late, and crew and equipment disappear into a worm's gullet. Spotters maintain constant vigil, their instruments reading seismic vibrations that indicate worm movement. They watch for the telltale sand wave, a cresting mountain motion that reminds observers of a giant fish swimming just beneath the water's surface. When spotters call the warning, everything else stops. No consideration of profit or quotas can override the simple biological fact that sandworms always come, and they are always hungry. The Harkonnens, in their decades of controlling Arrakis, developed harvesting into a ruthless efficiency. They maintained operations with minimal safety margins, accepting the loss of equipment and crews as acceptable costs against maximum spice extraction. Their maintenance and salaries were held to 14%, their profit margins correspondingly high. House Atreides brings a different philosophy to the operation. Duke Leto understands that winning Fremen loyalty requires demonstrating care for human life above mere profit. When he witnesses a crawler crew's potential abandonment to an approaching worm, his immediate response is to risk his own aircrafts to save them. His willingness to sacrifice spice cargo for human lives becomes the first step in building the desert power his house will need to survive. The spice flows outward from Arrakis in carefully measured quantities, each gram more valuable than its weight in precious metals. CHOAM's vast trading networks carry Melange to every inhabited world, where it serves purposes beyond navigation. The logistics of this distribution represent the most complex commercial operation in human history. Guild highliners serve as the primary transport mechanism, their vast holds carrying spice alongside other cargo. These ships, large enough to hold entire cities, move between systems with clockwork precision. The Guild's scheduling becomes the heartbeat of interstellar commerce. When a highliner arrives, markets across dozens of worlds shift in response to the cargo manifests. The spice travels in sealed containers, calibrated to preserve its potency across light years and decades. Some goes to Guild navigation schools on Wallach 9 and Junction, where students learn to consume increasing doses until their prescient abilities develop. Other shipments reach the laboratories of the Bene Gesserit, where Reverend Mothers transform Melange into more specialized awareness spectrum narcotics. The largest quantity, however, feeds the daily consumption of ordinary citizens across the Imperium. Even the vast middle classes across human space consume diluted spice with their regular meals, binding them to Arrakis through every breath, every heartbeat. This universal dependence creates the most stable market in galactic history. Demand that cannot be reduced, production that cannot be duplicated. CHOAM's trading houses measure their wealth in spice allocations. A handful of Melange can buy a home on Tupil. Larger quantities purchase planetary governorships, industrial complexes, even the loyalty of entire armies. The spice becomes the secret coinage of the Imperium, the ultimate medium of exchange that underlies all other currencies. Yet the distribution system creates its own vulnerabilities. Heavy speculative stockpiling by certain great houses creates artificial scarcities and price manipulation. The Harkonnens accumulated vast hoards during their tenure on Arrakis, building strategic reserves that could destabilize markets across multiple systems. When Duke Leto arrives to replace them, he inherits not just a production facility, but responsibility for maintaining the economic stability of human civilization. In the upper reaches of Guild highliners, beings that were once human float in chambers filled with orange spice gas. These are the navigators, the prescient pilots whose enhanced perception enables faster-than-light travel across the known universe. Their transformation represents both the ultimate expression of spice's power and the ultimate cost of galactic civilization. The navigator's body changes through prolonged spice exposure. Limbs elongate and thin, becoming almost translucent. The skull expands to accommodate enhanced neural capacity. Most dramatically, the eyes develop the blue-within-blue coloration that marks heavy spice addiction. Pupils completely saturated with melange until they resemble sapphires reflecting depths of space itself. When navigators consume massive doses of spice, they can perceive the safe pathways through folded space, the narrow threads of possibility that allow instantaneous travel between distant stars. This prescient sight reveals the mathematical relationships underlying the universe's structure, the quantum pathways that connect every point to every other point across impossible distances. Without this spice-enhanced navigation, faster-than-light travel becomes impossibly dangerous. Ships attempting to navigate the fold of space without prescient guidance vanish into dimensions that have no names, never to return. The few vessels that attempt such journeys arrive at their destinations decades late, their crews aged beyond recognition, their cargo spoiled by temporal distortion. The Guild's monopoly on space travel rests entirely upon the navigator's spice-induced abilities. No mechanical computer, no artificial intelligence, no ordinary human pilot can match their intuitive understanding of space-time relationships. The Butlerian Jihad's prohibition against thinking machines makes this biological solution the only viable option for maintaining interstellar civilization. Yet the navigators pay a price for their enhanced abilities. Prolonged spice exposure creates total dependence. Without constant access to melange, they die within days. Their transformed bodies cannot process normal human food or breathe unfiltered air. They become living extensions of their spacecraft, unable to exist outside the specialized environments that sustain their altered physiology. The Guild guards its navigators jealously, providing them with the finest spice available and protecting them from any threat that might disrupt the supply. When political tensions arise around spice production, the navigators' requirements take precedence over every other consideration. Their survival ensures the continuation of interstellar commerce. Their death would fragment the Imperium into isolated worlds within a single generation. Beyond the specialized needs of navigators and Bene Gesserit, spice consumption has become woven into the fabric of daily life across the Imperium. The geriatric properties of melange extend human lifespans far beyond their natural span, creating a class of rulers who accumulate centuries of experience and wealth. Without melange, even the wealthy live and die according to ancient measures, no more than 100 years or so. This extension of life transforms the nature of political power. When emperors and nobles can rule for centuries rather than decades, they develop perspectives that span generations of ordinary human experience. Long-term planning becomes possible on scales that dwarf any pre-spice civilization. Dynasties accumulate knowledge, resources, and influence across time frames that would have seemed impossible to their ancestors. The political implications extend beyond individual longevity. When the powerful live for centuries, social mobility becomes nearly impossible. the rigid class structure enforced by the Fofreluches, a place for every man and every man in his place, becomes self-perpetuating. Those born to power have centuries to consolidate their advantages, while those born to servitude face opponents who have had lifetimes to perfect their control. Even small doses of spice affect the general population. Trace amounts in daily meals enhance immune systems, sharpen perception, and provide subtle mood elevation. Billions of citizens across thousands of worlds wake each morning to food touched with cinnamon-scented melange, unknowingly renewing their dependence upon a single desert planet. This universal consumption creates political leverage that transcends military force. Control of spice distribution becomes control of life itself. Governments that displease the spice controllers find their populations aging rapidly, their immune systems failing, their cognitive abilities declining. No army can fight effectively when its soldiers suffer withdrawal from a drug that has become essential to their biology. The economic calculations become staggering. When Duke Leto's Mentat Thufir Hawat estimates the profit margins for Arrakis operations, he must account not merely for extraction costs and transportation, but for the political requirements of keeping entire populations satisfied with their spice allotments. Under Harkonnen management, profits reached extreme levels through brutal efficiency and minimal safety considerations. The Atreides approach, emphasizing worker safety and Fremen cooperation, reduces immediate profits but builds the foundation for long-term stability. CHOAM's directorship votes shift with spice allocation decisions. The organization controls far more than Melange: ink vines, whale fur, sugar wire, Ixian artifacts, entertainment industries, transportation networks, banking systems, yet all these vast enterprises depend ultimately upon spice revenues for their financing. When House Atreides gains control of Arrakis, they acquire not merely mining rights, but influence over the fundamental economic engine of human civilization. What emerges from this ancient pattern is a truth that humbles all human ambition. The Imperium, for all its vast fleets and mighty armies, exists entirely at the sufferance of creatures that care nothing for human desires. The sandtrout and their sandworm children follow biological imperatives established millions of years before the first human looked up at the stars. Every guild navigator who folds space does so because sandtrout chose eons ago to transform a wet world into desert. Every emperor who rules for centuries does so because sandworms continue their endless dance beneath the dunes. Every world that receives its daily ration of spice does so because an ecosystem older than human memory maintains its perfect fragile balance. The spice is not merely a resource to be mined. It is the gift of a living planet that has shaped itself around a single, magnificent purpose. Arrakis has made itself into the universe's most essential world by becoming the universe's most inhospitable one. The seeming contradiction reveals a deeper truth about survival and adaptation. Consider the magnificent irony. Humanity's greatest technological achievement, faster-than-light travel, depends entirely upon creatures that exist in a state between plant and animal, following patterns established before mammals walked upright on any world. The most sophisticated navigation computers ever conceived cannot match the intuitive understanding of space-time relationships that emerges from biological minds enhanced by organic compounds produced by these simple desert creatures. The Fremen understand this relationship more clearly than any off-world scientist. They speak of the desert as a living entity, of the worms as its manifestation, of themselves as servants rather than masters. Their ecological wisdom recognizes that attempting to control Arrakis would destroy the very processes that make it valuable. Instead, they work within the patterns established by millions of years of evolution. This understanding carries profound implications for the future. The introduction of water to the deep desert will alter the sandtrout's domain, changing the chemistry that creates both spice and worms. The ecological transformation promised by planetologists like Liet Kynes represents a choice between human comfort and galactic civilization, between a green world that could support large populations and a desert world that enables interstellar travel. The Fremen prophecy speaks of this tension in religious terms. The coming of Muad'Dib will bring both liberation and loss, water and the end of the spice. Future generations will face decisions that their ancestors could never have imagined, whether to preserve the ecosystem that made interstellar civilization possible, or to transform it into something more hospitable to human life. In the deep places beneath CHOAM and Arrakis, where Fremen elders keep the old wisdom, they speak of this truth in whispers. The off-worlders who come to exploit Arrakis see only the spice, the wealth, the power. They calculate profit margins and extraction rates, measure success in terms of increased production and reduced costs. But the Fremen understand. They do not control the desert, they serve it. They do not command the worms, they honor them. This knowledge will matter greatly in the times to come, when the ecological transformation of Arrakis begins to shift the ancient balance. The introduction of water to the deep desert will alter the sandtrout's domain, changing the chemistry that creates both spice and worms. Future generations will face a choice between a green world and a spice world, between human comfort and galactic civilization. The Fremen have prepared for this transition through centuries of careful planning. Their hidden water reserves, their knowledge of desert ecology, their understanding of the worm life cycle, all represent attempts to preserve options for future generations. They know that the choice, when it comes, must be made with full understanding of its consequences. Yet for now, the rhythm continues unchanged. In the deep desert, sandtrout gather and release their hoarded water. Pre-spice masses brew in darkness, reaching toward the moment of explosive transformation. Great worms move beneath the dunes, their territorial patterns unchanged since before human memory began. And across 10,000 worlds, humanity continues its spice-enabled expansion among the stars, dependent upon a cycle they barely comprehend. The guild highliners maintain their schedules, carrying cargo and passengers between systems with mathematical precision. CHOAM trading houses calculate their quarterly profits, measuring success in terms of spice allocations and market share. The great houses maneuver for political advantage, building alliances and plotting betrayals around access to Melange reserves. All of these activities depend upon the continuation of patterns established before human civilization existed. The greatest irony of the spice empire lies in its fundamental fragility. Remove any single element of the ecosystem, and the entire structure collapses. No laboratory can recreate the precise conditions that produce melange. No artificial environment can sustain the complete life cycle from sandtrout to sandworm to spice. This fragility creates the ultimate strategic weapon, the threat of destroying spice production entirely. Whoever controls Arrakis holds not merely economic leverage, but the power to end interstellar civilization. The person who could destroy something controls it absolutely, a truth that future rulers of Arrakis will learn to their cost. Beyond the great spice cities of Arrakis and Carthage lies another Arrakis, the deep desert where the true patterns unfold. Here, In the vast emptiness that off-worlders fear to enter, the Fremen have built a civilization based on principles that challenge every assumption about desert survival. Water becomes currency in this realm, measured not in abstract credits, but in physical need. The water rings, water counters of different sizes, designate specific amounts payable from Fremen stores. These have profound significance far beyond the idea of money, especially in birth, death, and courtship rituals. To give water to someone is to give life itself. To waste water is a crime against survival. The Fremen concept of water burden encompasses both practical and spiritual obligations. Every drop saved represents duty to the tribe, to the future, to the desert itself. Water discipline becomes a harsh training that fits inhabitants for existence without waste. A properly trained Freeman can survive in conditions that would kill an off-worlder within hours. The deep desert holds secrets that escape casual observation. Ancient water sources sealed by sandtrout activity lie hundreds of meters below the surface, accessible only to those who understand the underground geography. Wind patterns change with the seasons, creating opportunities for moisture collection that require precise timing and placement. Even the seeming emptiness conceals signs readable by trained eyes, the tracks of creatures that exist nowhere else, the subtle coloration of sand that indicates mineral content, the temperature variations that reveal underground formations. Still tent technology extends beyond simple moisture reclamation. These shelters create microclimates that can support human life indefinitely, provided their occupants understand the principles involved. The tent walls filter air and recycle breath moisture. Internal reservoirs store accumulated water. Temperature controls maintain livable conditions even during the extreme heat of desert days. The Freeman knowledge extends to reading weather patterns with an accuracy that surpasses technological instruments. A trained weather scanner can poll the sand and read wind patterns to predict storms days in advance. They understand that survival depends not merely on having the right equipment, but on reading the desert's moods and responding accordingly. The stars wheel overhead in their ancient patterns, their light gentle on the cooling dunes. Somewhere beneath the sand, the little makers continue their patient work, preparing tomorrow's spice, tomorrow's worms, tomorrow's navigation. The universe is vast, but it turns upon this single world, this marriage of sand and biology that makes all human journeys possible. In Guild highliners orbiting distant stars, navigators float in their orange-misted chambers, calculating routes between systems they will never see with unenhanced eyes. On 10,000 worlds, ordinary citizens wake to meals touched with cinnamon, unknowingly participating in the great cycle that connects them to a desert planet most will never visit. The rhythm transcends human understanding. Empires rise and fall, technologies advance and fail, yet the basic pattern remains unchanged. Water becomes scarce, creatures adapt, spice emerges, consciousness expands, travel becomes possible. Each element depends upon every other. Remove any single component and the entire structure collapses. Rest now, knowing that some cycles are larger than empires, older than ambition, more enduring than the rise and fall of dynasties. The spice flows, the worms move, the guild ships carry sleepers between distant suns. The desert teaches patience through extremes, precision through scarcity, reverence through power. In the deep places where few dare venture, ancient wisdom continues. The Fremen understand what the off-worlders miss, that survival requires serving something larger than oneself. The desert shapes everything that lives upon it, but it also provides for those who learn its lessons. All is as it should be in the deep desert where everything begins.